Sarah Martinez wiped the sweat from her forehead as she collected the empty brass casings scattered across the concrete floor of Pistol Bay 3. The indoor shooting range had closed 30 minutes ago, but her cleaning duties stretched well into the evening. At 24, she had been working at Thunder Ridge Shooting Range for 8 months, taking the job after her factory position was eliminated. The pay wasn't great, but it covered her rent and kept food on the table for her and her 7-year-old daughter, Emma. The smell of gunpowder still hung heavy in the air as Sarah methodically swept each shooting lane. Most people didn't realize how much work went into maintaining a shooting range. Between cleaning the bays, replacing targets, and ensuring safety equipment was properly maintained, her days were long and physically demanding. She had grown used to the routine, finding a strange comfort in the repetitive nature of the work. As she moved to the far end of Bay 3, Sarah noticed something glinting under the shooting bench. Kneeling down, she discovered a small silver pistol that had apparently been left behind by one of the day's customers. The weapon was a compact .22 caliber revolver, smaller than most of the guns she had seen during her time at the range. She picked it up carefully, noting its surprisingly lightweight and the intricate engravings along the barrel. Sarah had never held a real firearm before working at Thunder Ridge. Growing up in a small apartment with her single mother, guns were something she only saw in movies. Even during her months at the range, her job kept her focused on cleaning and maintenance rather than actually handling the weapons. But there was something about this particular pistol that seemed different, almost inviting. She looked around the empty range, confirming she was alone. The rangemaster, Jack Morrison, had left 20 minutes earlier, and the last customers had departed well before closing time. Sarah found herself studying the pistol more closely, turning it over in her hands and examining its craftsmanship. The grip felt natural against her palm, and she was surprised by how balanced the weapon seemed. Without really thinking about it, Sarah found herself assuming what she thought might be a proper shooting stance. She had watched hundreds of customers over the past 8 months, observing their techniques and listening to the instruction given by the range officers. She raised the pistol, pointing it downrange toward the paper targets that hung 30 feet away. The weight distribution felt right in her hands, and she discovered that her natural grip seemed to align the sights almost perfectly. She had never realized that shooting might come naturally to some people, but as she held the pistol extended in front of her, everything seemed to click into place. Her breathing slowed, and she found herself focusing intensely on the target at the far end of the bay. Sarah lowered the weapon and looked around once more, ensuring she was still alone. The range's security cameras had been acting up all week, with several of them showing only static. She knew she should simply log the found pistol and place it in the lost and found box, but curiosity was getting the better of her. What would it feel like to actually fire a shot? She had watched the range officers demonstrate proper safety procedures countless times. Always treat the weapon as if it were loaded. Never point it at anything you don't intend to destroy. Keep your finger off the trigger until ready to shoot. Be sure of your target and what lies beyond it. The rules had become second nature through observation, even though she had never actually applied them herself. Opening the pistol's cylinder, Sarah discovered it contained 6 cartridges. Someone had left a fully loaded weapon behind, which violated several range policies. She should definitely report this to Jack Morrison first thing in the morning. But as she held the loaded pistol, she found herself wondering what it would feel like to hit the center of one of those targets that hung downrange. The range was completely empty, and she would be alone for at least another hour while she finished her cleaning duties. The sound insulation was excellent, designed to prevent noise from disturbing the surrounding businesses. If she fired just one shot, no one would ever know. She could reload the chamber and report the found pistol as if nothing had happened. Sarah's heart began beating faster as she considered the possibility. She had spent months watching other people experience the satisfaction of hitting their targets, seeing their faces light up when they achieved a good grouping or hit the bullseye. She had always wondered what that feeling might be like, but had never had the opportunity or courage to find out. The target hanging in her lane showed the standard bullseye pattern, with concentric circles leading to the small black center. Most of the customers she had observed struggled to hit anywhere near the center, especially when they were just starting out. But something told her that she might be different, that the natural way the pistol felt in her hands might translate into actual shooting ability. She raised the weapon again, this time with serious intent. Her hands were steady and her breathing had become slow and controlled. The front sight seemed to align perfectly with the rear sight, creating a clear sight picture that pointed directly at the center of the target. Sarah had never felt so focused on anything in her entire life. Taking one final look around the empty range, Sarah made her decision. She would fire one shot, just to satisfy her curiosity, and then properly secure the weapon for return to its owner. What could possibly go wrong with a single, carefully aimed shot in a controlled environment? She had no idea that her life was about to change forever, or that someone was about to witness something truly extraordinary. Sarah steadied her breathing and squeezed the trigger gently, just as she had observed countless customers do over the past 8 months. The pistol jumped slightly in her hands as the shot rang out, but she maintained her grip and sight alignment instinctively. The sound was sharper than she had expected, even with all the acoustic dampening in the range. Her ears rang slightly, reminding her that she should have put on hearing protection. Walking downrange to examine her target, Sarah felt a mixture of nervousness and excitement. She had no idea what to expect from her first shot, having seen beginners miss the target paper entirely or hit wildly in the outer rings. As she approached the target, her eyes widened in amazement. The bullet hole was perfectly centered in the black bullseye, creating a neat, round hole that couldn't have been more precisely placed if she had used a compass. Sarah stared at the target in disbelief. During her months at the range, she had seen experienced shooters struggle to achieve such precision, and here she had done it on her very first attempt. She looked back at the pistol in her hand, wondering if somehow the weapon itself was responsible for the incredible accuracy, but deep down she knew that wasn't possible. The shot had felt natural, almost effortless, as if she had been born to do this. Unable to resist the temptation, Sarah decided to try one more shot. After all, one perfect shot could have been pure luck, but 2 would indicate real skill. She returned to the firing line and assumed her stance once again. This time she took even more care with her breathing and sight alignment, trying to replicate exactly what she had done moments before. The second shot rang out with the same sharp crack, and Sarah immediately knew it had been another good hit. The recoil felt even more manageable this time, and she was beginning to understand how to work with the pistol rather than fighting against it. When she walked downrange to check her target, she discovered that the second bullet hole was so close to the first that they nearly overlapped, creating what experienced shooters would recognize as an exceptional grouping. Sarah's mind raced as she stared at the evidence of her natural shooting ability. She had always been good with her hands, excelling at detailed work and having excellent hand-eye coordination. But this was something entirely different. This was a skill that some people spent years trying to develop, and she seemed to possess it instinctively. Meanwhile, Jack Morrison was sitting in his truck in the parking lot, finishing up some paperwork before heading home. As the range master, he took his responsibilities seriously and often stayed late to ensure everything was properly secured. He had been working at Thunder Ridge for 15 years and had seen thousands of shooters come and go. At 52, he was a former military man who had served 2 tours overseas and understood firearms better than most people. Understood their own vehicles, Jack. Heard the first shot through the building's walls and immediately knew something was wrong. The range had been closed for over 30 minutes, and he had personally ensured that all customers had departed. The sound was definitely coming from inside the building, which meant either someone had broken in or one of his employees was doing something they shouldn't be doing. He quietly entered through the back entrance, using his master key to avoid making noise. Jack had dealt with break-ins before, and he knew the importance of assessing the situation before taking action. As he moved through the building, he could hear movement in Pistol Bay 3, along with the sound of footsteps walking downrange toward the targets, positioning himself where he could observe without being seen. Jack watched as Sarah examined her target and then returned to the firing line. He recognized her immediately as the young woman who had been working cleaning duties for the past several months. She had always seemed responsible and hardworking, but he had never seen her show any interest in actually shooting. In fact, he wasn't even sure if she had ever held a firearm before coming to work at the range. Jack was about to announce his presence and find out what was going on when Sarah fired her second shot. Even from his concealed position, he could tell that her stance and grip were remarkably good for someone with no apparent training. Her follow-through was textbook perfect, and she seemed completely comfortable handling the weapon. This was not the behavior of someone who was unfamiliar with firearms. When Sarah walked downrange to check her second shot, Jack moved closer to get a better view of her target. What he saw made him question his own eyes. The target showed 2 bullet holes so close together that they formed what competitive shooters would call a cloverleaf pattern. This was the kind of accuracy that took most people months or years to develop, and he was watching someone achieve it on what appeared to be their first attempts. Jack had trained hundreds of new shooters during his time at Thunder Ridge, and he had never seen natural ability like this. Most beginners struggled to hit the target paper at all, let alone place shots in the center ring. Even experienced shooters had difficulty achieving such tight groupings consistently. What he was witnessing was either a complete fluke or the emergence of genuine talent. As Sarah prepared for what appeared to be a third shot, Jack made his decision. Rather than interrupting and potentially embarrassing her, he would continue to observe and see just how remarkable her natural ability truly was. If she really possessed this level of innate skill, it would be a shame to waste it. The shooting sports world was always looking for new talent, and someone with this kind of natural accuracy could go very far with proper training and guidance. Sarah raised the pistol for her third attempt, completely unaware that she was being watched. Her confidence was growing with each shot, and she was beginning to understand how the weapon responded to her input. The grip felt increasingly natural in her hands, and she was developing an intuitive sense of how to achieve the sight alignment that produced such accurate results. Jack held his breath as he watched her fire the third shot. The report echoed through the range, and he could see that her form remained consistent and controlled. Whatever was happening here, it was clear that Sarah possessed something special. The question was what he should do about it, and how this discovery might change both of their lives forever. The third shot produced another perfect hit, creating a triangular pattern of holes that could be covered by a quarter. Sarah stood downrange, staring at her target in complete amazement. 3 shots, 3 perfect hits. This couldn't be normal for a beginner. She had watched enough customers struggle with basic marksmanship to know that what she was achieving was extraordinary. A slow clap echoed through the range, causing Sarah to spin around in panic. Jack Morrison stepped out from behind the partition wall, his weathered face showing a mixture of surprise and admiration. Sarah's heart sank as she realized she had been caught red-handed, holding a customer's pistol after hours and firing shots without permission. Her job was surely over, and she might even face criminal charges. "Don't look so terrified," Jack said, his voice calm but serious. "You're not in trouble, but we need to talk about what I just witnessed." He walked closer, his experienced eyes taking in every detail of her shooting stance and the way she held the weapon. "How long have you been shooting?" "I haven't," Sarah replied quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "This is my first time. I found this pistol under the bench and I was just curious. I'm sorry, Mr. Morrison, I know I shouldn't have done this." Jack stopped walking and studied her face carefully. In his 15 years as a range master, he had developed a good sense for when people were being truthful. Sarah's expression showed genuine remorse and fear, but no signs of deception. If she was telling the truth about this being her first time shooting, then what he had just witnessed was nothing short of remarkable. "Show me your target up close," Jack said, walking toward the downrange area. When they reached the paper target, he examined the 3 bullet holes with the eye of someone who had seen thousands of targets over the years. The grouping was tighter than anything he had seen from a first-time shooter, and better than most people achieved after months of practice. "Sarah, I need you to understand something," Jack said, turning to face her directly. "What you just did is not normal. Most people who have never fired a gun before can't even hit the target paper, let alone place 3 shots in the center like this. This is the kind of accuracy that competitive shooters work years to achieve." Sarah looked down at the pistol in her hands, still processing what Jack was telling her. "I don't understand. It just felt natural. Like the gun was pointing itself where I wanted it to go." Jack nodded slowly. During his military service, he had encountered a few soldiers who possessed exceptional natural marksmanship abilities. They were rare, maybe 1 in several thousand, but when you found them, they were unmistakable. Sarah appeared to be one of these gifted individuals, and she had stumbled into this discovery completely by accident. "I want you to try something," Jack said, pulling out his personal service pistol from his holster. "This is a different caliber and weight than what you've been shooting. If you really have natural ability, you should be able to adapt to a different weapon relatively quickly." Sarah hesitated, still worried about the consequences of her unauthorized shooting session. Am I going to lose my job over this? That depends on what happens next, Jack replied. If you cooperate with me and show me what you're capable of, we might be able to turn this into something positive. I've been involved in competitive shooting for most of my adult life, and I know talent when I see it. Against her better judgment, Sarah accepted Jack's pistol. It was heavier than the .22 she had been using, with a different grip angle and sight configuration. Most shooters would need time to adjust to a new weapon. But as Sarah raised the pistol and aligned the sights, everything felt familiar again. The fundamentals seemed to transfer automatically from one gun to another. Jack set up a fresh target and stepped back to observe. Same distance, same target. Let's see what you can do with a .45 caliber. Sarah took her time with the first shot, getting a feel for the heavier weapon. When she squeezed the trigger, the recoil was noticeably stronger, but she managed it well. The bullet struck the target just outside the center ring, which would have been an excellent shot for any beginner. But Sarah frowned, clearly disappointed that it wasn't as centered as her previous shots. That felt different, she said, examining the pistol more carefully. The trigger breaks at a different point and the sights line up differently than the other gun. Jack was impressed by her analytical approach. Most new shooters would focus on the excitement of hitting the target at all, but Sarah was already identifying the technical differences between weapons and thinking about how to compensate for them. This level of immediate adaptation was another sign of exceptional natural ability. Try again, Jack encouraged. Feel how the gun wants to behave and work with it instead of against it. Sarah's second shot with the .45 was much better, striking the target in the inner ring. Her third shot hit dead center, and by her fourth and fifth attempts, she was grouping shots nearly as tightly as she had with the .22. Jack watched in amazement as she adapted to the new weapon in real time, making tiny adjustments to her grip and stance that most shooters would need weeks to figure out. This is incredible, Jack muttered, more to himself than to Sarah. I've never seen anyone adapt this quickly to different firearms. You have a gift that most people can't even imagine. Sarah lowered the pistol and looked at Jack with a mixture of confusion and curiosity. What does this mean? What am I supposed to do with this? Jack smiled for the first time since discovering her unauthorized shooting session. It means your life just got a lot more interesting. There are opportunities in competitive shooting that most people never even know exist. With proper training and the right equipment, you could potentially compete at national and international levels. The possibility had never occurred to Sarah. She had taken the cleaning job at the range purely out of necessity, never imagining that she might have a hidden talent for the very activity that took place there every day. But as she stood holding Jack's pistol, surrounded by evidence of her remarkable accuracy, she began to wonder if her life might be about to change in ways she never could have anticipated. Over the following weeks, Jack Morrison became Sarah's unofficial mentor. He arrived early each morning to provide basic instruction before the range opened to customers, and stayed late to continue her training after closing time. What he discovered during these sessions exceeded even his optimistic expectations. Sarah didn't just have natural accuracy. She possessed an almost supernatural ability to read wind conditions, compensate for different ammunition weights, and adapt to various shooting positions. The transformation in Sarah's confidence was remarkable. The quiet, somewhat timid cleaning lady had evolved into a focused and determined student of marksmanship. She absorbed every piece of technical knowledge that Jack shared with her, asking intelligent questions and demonstrating an intuitive understanding of ballistics that typically took years to develop. Word of Sarah's abilities began to spread quietly through the local shooting community. Jack was careful not to make a spectacle of her training, but a few trusted friends and fellow competitive shooters had witnessed her practice sessions. The consensus was unanimous. They were witnessing the emergence of someone truly special. 3 weeks after her discovery, Jack arranged for Sarah to meet Tommy Chen, a former Olympic shooting coach who lived about an hour away. Tommy had trained several world-class marksmen and had an eye for identifying exceptional talent. When Jack called to describe Sarah's abilities, Tommy was initially skeptical. Claims of natural shooting prodigies were common in the shooting world, but genuine talent at the level Jack was describing was extraordinarily rare. The meeting was scheduled for a Saturday morning when the range would be relatively quiet. Sarah had been nervous all week, knowing that this encounter could determine whether her newfound passion had any real future. She had been practicing diligently, but the pressure of performing for an expert evaluator was entirely different from her private training sessions with Jack. Tommy Chen arrived precisely on time, carrying a worn leather case that contained his personal collection of competition pistols. He was a small, precise man in his 60s, with gentle eyes that seemed to take in every detail. His reputation in competitive shooting circles was legendary, and Sarah felt intimidated just shaking his hand. "Jack tells me you have some natural ability," Tommy said simply. "I've heard similar claims many times over the years, so I hope you won't be offended if I'm somewhat skeptical. Genuine talent is much rarer than people realize." Sarah nodded nervously. "I understand. I'm still pretty new to all of this myself." Tommy set up a series of increasingly challenging targets at various distances. He started with standard bullseye patterns at 25 yards, then added smaller targets, different shapes, and varying lighting conditions. His approach was methodical and scientific, designed to test not just accuracy but adaptability and consistency under pressure. "I want you to use your own technique," Tommy instructed. "Don't try to impress me with anything fancy. Just shoot the way that feels natural to you." Sarah began with her usual careful approach, taking time to establish proper sight alignment and breathing rhythm. Her first 5 shots created a tight group in the center of the target, which was competent but not exceptional by competitive standards. Tommy nodded approvingly but didn't seem particularly impressed. "Now I want you to speed up," Tommy said. "Competitive shooting isn't just about accuracy. It's about achieving that accuracy quickly and consistently. Try to cut your time between shots in half." This was where Sarah's true gift became apparent. As she increased her pace, her accuracy actually improved rather than deteriorated. The faster rhythm seemed to eliminate overthinking and allow her natural instincts to take control. Her next series of shots created an even tighter group, fired in roughly half the time of her initial attempts. Tommy's expression began to change. He had seen thousands of shooters over his career, and very few could maintain accuracy while increasing speed. Most people had to choose between fast shooting and accurate shooting, but Sarah seemed capable of both simultaneously. "Interesting," Tommy murmured, making notes on a small pad. "Let's try something more challenging." He set up targets at multiple distances and angles, creating a course of fire that would test Sarah's ability to transition quickly between different shooting scenarios. This type of challenge typically required months of practice to execute competently, but Tommy was curious to see how Sarah's natural abilities would translate to more complex situations. What happened next surprised everyone, including Sarah herself. She moved through the course with fluid grace, engaging each target with confidence and precision. Her transitions were smooth, her sight acquisitions were rapid, and her shot placement remained consistently excellent throughout the entire sequence. When the final shot was fired, Tommy walked downrange to examine the results in silence. Each target showed evidence of precise hits, with most shots falling within the high-scoring areas. For someone with only 3 weeks of formal training, the performance was nothing short of extraordinary. "Sarah," Tommy said quietly when he returned to the firing line, "I need to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest with me. Have you ever received any formal shooting instruction before meeting Jack?" "No, sir," Sarah replied. "Before I found that pistol in the cleaning bay, I had never even held a real gun." Tommy studied her face carefully, looking for any signs of deception. Like Jack, he had developed a good sense for reading people over the years. Sarah's sincerity was unmistakable, which made her abilities all the more remarkable. "In 40 years of coaching," Tommy said slowly, "I have encountered perhaps 3 or 4 individuals with the level of natural talent you just demonstrated. Most of them went on to achieve remarkable things in competitive shooting. The question is, what do you want to do with this gift?" Sarah looked at Jack, then back at Tommy. The idea that she possessed genuine talent was still difficult to process. 3 weeks ago, she had been a single mother working a minimum-wage cleaning job with no particular prospects for the future. Now 2 respected experts were telling her that she might have the potential to compete at the highest levels of her sport. "I don't really know what's possible," Sarah admitted. "A month ago, I didn't even know that competitive shooting existed. But I love this. When I'm shooting, everything else disappears. It's the first time in my life that I've felt like I might be truly good at something important." Tommy Chen made a decision that would change Sarah's life forever. He offered to sponsor her entry into regional competitive shooting, providing access to professional-grade equipment and covering the costs of ammunition and travel to competitions. In exchange, Sarah would train seriously under his guidance and represent his coaching program at various events. For someone in Sarah's financial situation, this opportunity was like winning the lottery. The training regimen that Tommy designed was intensive and comprehensive. Sarah would continue working part-time at the range to maintain some income. But her primary focus would shift to developing her shooting skills. Jack Morrison enthusiastically supported the arrangement, adjusting Sarah's work schedule to accommodate her training, sessions, and even providing additional practice time at the range free of charge. Sarah's first real test came 6 weeks later at a regional precision pistol championship held 3 hours away. She had never been to a formal shooting competition and was overwhelmed by the professional atmosphere, sophisticated equipment, and serious demeanor of the other competitors. Many of them had been shooting competitively for decades and possessed gear worth thousands of dollars. Tommy had entered Sarah in the novice division, but even among beginners, her lack of experience was obvious. She was the only competitor who didn't own her own equipment, borrowing a pistol from Tommy's collection and wearing borrowed ear protection. Some of the other shooters looked at her with barely concealed skepticism, clearly wondering what she was doing there. The competition format consisted of multiple stages, each designed to test different aspects of marksmanship skill. Competitors would fire at various distances and target configurations, with scores calculated based on accuracy and time. Sarah watched the first few shooters carefully, trying to understand the rhythm and expectations of formal competition. When her turn came, Sarah felt a familiar calmness settle over her. The nervousness that had plagued her all morning disappeared as she took her position at the firing line. This was what she had been training for, and her body seemed to know exactly what to do. Her first stage performance was solid but not spectacular, earning respectable scores that placed her in the middle of the novice field. However, as the day progressed, Sarah began to find her rhythm. Each subsequent stage saw improvement in both her technique and her confidence. By the afternoon rounds, she was shooting consistently well enough to move up in the rankings. More importantly, she was learning to compete under pressure and adapt to different course designs. The final stage of the competition was the most challenging, featuring small targets at maximum distance with strict time limits. This was where experience typically separated serious competitors from recreational shooters. Many novice competitors struggled with this stage, finding it difficult to maintain accuracy under the pressure of the timer. Sarah approached the final stage with a quiet determination that impressed Tommy. She had absorbed every lesson from the day's earlier stages and seemed to understand intuitively how to apply that knowledge to the final challenge. When the timer started, she moved with smooth efficiency, engaging each target with precise, deliberate shots. The results were stunning. Sarah not only recorded the highest score in the novice division for the final stage, but her performance would have placed her in the top 5 among experienced competitors in the advanced divisions. The range officer had to double-check her target to confirm the score, and a small crowd of competitors gathered to see what the newcomer had accomplished. When the final scores were posted, Sarah had won the novice division by a significant margin. More remarkably, her overall score would have earned a respectable finish in the expert division, an almost unprecedented achievement for someone competing in their first formal event. The shooting community was a small one, and word of her performance spread quickly among the spectators and competitors. Tommy Chen smiled with satisfaction as he watched Sarah receive her first-place trophy. He had suspected that she possessed exceptional ability, but seeing her perform under competition pressure confirmed his assessment. Sarah wasn't just naturally talented. She was a competitor who seemed to elevate her performance when it mattered most. The drive home was filled with excited conversation about Sarah's future in competitive shooting. Tommy explained the pathway from regional competitions to national events, and eventually to international competition if her development continued. Sarah listened with growing amazement as she learned about the world that was opening up to her. "The key now is to maintain your development momentum," Tommy explained. "Natural talent will only take you so far. The competitors at higher levels have both talent and thousands of hours of dedicated practice. You'll need to be willing to commit seriously to training if you want to reach your full potential." Sarah nodded eagerly. For the first time in her adult life, she had found something that she was not only good at, but passionate about. The single mother who had been struggling to make ends meet was beginning to envision a future that involved travel, competition, and the possibility of achieving something truly significant. Jack Morrison was waiting at the range when they returned, eager to hear about Sarah's first competition. When Tommy recounted her victory and showed him the trophy, Jack's pride was obvious. He had recognized Sarah's potential from that first night when he caught her shooting in the cleaning bay, but even he hadn't anticipated such rapid competitive success. "This is just the beginning," Jack said, examining Sarah's first-place trophy. "With proper support and continued training, there's no telling how far you might go. The shooting sports world is always looking for new talent, and you've definitely announced your arrival." Sarah held her trophy and thought about how dramatically her life had changed in just 2 months. The found pistol that had started this journey was still locked in the range's lost and found, never claimed by its owner. Sometimes the most significant discoveries happen completely by accident, when curiosity leads to unexpected revelations about hidden abilities and untapped potential. 2 years later, Sarah Martinez stood on the podium at the National Precision Pistol Championships, wearing the bronze medal she had just earned in one of the most competitive shooting events in the country. The journey from cleaning lady to national-level competitor had been demanding, requiring sacrifices and dedication that she never could have imagined when she first picked up that forgotten pistol in the cleaning bay. The transformation had affected every aspect of her life. Sarah now worked as a part-time instructor at Thunder Ridge Shooting Range, teaching basic marksmanship to new customers while maintaining her own training schedule. The income from coaching, combined with modest sponsorship deals from equipment manufacturers, had allowed her to provide a more stable life for her daughter Emma, who had become her most enthusiastic supporter. Emma, now 9 years old, attended every competition she could, cheering for her mother and helping to manage equipment. The little girl had developed her own interest in competitive shooting, though she wouldn't be eligible to compete for several more years. Sarah was careful to ensure that Emma's childhood remained balanced, but she was proud that her daughter could see her pursuing excellence in something meaningful. Tommy Chen had proven to be more than just a coach. He had become a mentor and friend who guided Sarah through the complex world of competitive shooting. Under his instruction, she had learned advanced techniques, sports psychology, and the mental discipline required to perform under extreme pressure. Her natural talent had been refined and enhanced through thousands of hours of practice and competition experience. The road to national competition had been challenging. Sarah had traveled across the country, competing in regional events and slowly building her reputation within the shooting community. Each competition had been a learning experience, teaching her how to handle different conditions, equipment, and levels of pressure. Some events had resulted in victories, others in disappointing performances, but each had contributed to her development as a competitor. The financial challenges had been significant. Competitive shooting required substantial investments in equipment, ammunition, and travel expenses. Sarah had learned to stretch every dollar, sometimes sleeping in her car at distant competitions to save on hotel costs. The support from Tommy, Jack, and a growing network of friends in the shooting community had been essential to her continued participation. Her breakthrough had come 18 months after her first competition, when she won a major regional championship against a field that included several nationally ranked competitors. That victory had qualified her for national-level events and attracted the attention of equipment sponsors who were willing to provide support in exchange for representation at competitions. The media attention that followed her success had been unexpected. Sarah's story of discovering hidden talent while working as a cleaning lady resonated with people far beyond the shooting sports community. She had been featured in several magazines and had even appeared on a national television program that highlighted unusual success stories. Despite the attention and accolades, Sarah remained grounded and focused on continued improvement. She understood that her current success was just the beginning of what might be possible with continued dedication. Tommy had begun discussing the possibility of international competition, including events that could eventually lead to Olympic qualification. The shooting range that had been the site of her discovery had become a pilgrimage destination for young shooters who had heard Sarah's story. Jack Morrison had mounted a display case near the entrance that showcased Sarah's trophies and medals, along with photographs from her various competitions. He took obvious pride in his role in her development and frequently told visitors about that evening, when he had discovered her natural ability. The unclaimed pistol that had started everything remained in the range's lost and found, though it had taken on almost mythical significance among the regular customers. Jack had considered making it part of the Sarah Martinez display, but he preferred to keep it available, in case the original owner ever returned to claim it. Sarah's relationship with competitive shooting had evolved from initial curiosity to genuine passion and finally to professional dedication. She understood now that she possessed a rare gift, and she felt a responsibility to develop it to its fullest potential. The scared single mother who had worried about losing her job had been replaced by a confident athlete who competed on a national stage. As she stood holding her bronze medal, Sarah reflected on the chain of events that had led to this moment. If she hadn't been curious about that forgotten pistol, if Jack hadn't been working late that evening, if Tommy Chen hadn't been willing to take a chance on an unknown quantity, none of this would have been possible. Sometimes life's most significant opportunities arrive disguised as ordinary moments. The future stretched ahead with possibilities that Sarah was still learning to envision. International competition, potential Olympic involvement, and continued growth as both a competitor and instructor were all within reach. But perhaps most importantly, she had discovered that ordinary people could possess extraordinary abilities, waiting to be revealed by the right combination of opportunity, curiosity, and courage. That evening, as Sarah packed her equipment after the national championships, she received a phone call that would open yet another chapter in her remarkable journey. The caller introduced himself as a representative from the United States Olympic Training Center, explaining that her recent performances had caught the attention of the National Team Selection Committee. They were inviting her to attend a training camp designed to evaluate potential candidates for the upcoming international season. Sarah listened to the details with growing excitement and disbelief. The Olympic Games had always seemed like something that happened to other people, athletes who had been training since childhood with unlimited resources and professional support. The idea that she might be considered for such an elite level of competition was almost overwhelming. "We've been following your progress for the past year," the caller explained. "Your rapid development and competitive results suggest that you might have the potential to compete at the international level. The training camp will give us a better sense of whether Olympic competition might be a realistic goal for you." After ending the call, Sarah sat quietly in her hotel room, processing what had just happened. 3 years ago, she had been struggling to pay rent while working a minimum wage cleaning job. Now she was being invited to train with the best shooters in the country and potentially represent her nation in international competition. She thought about Emma, who would be so excited to hear this news, and about all the people who had supported her journey. Jack Morrison, who had recognized her potential and provided the foundation for her development. Tommy Chen, who had invested his time and expertise in her training. The shooting community that had welcomed her and encouraged her progress. Each had played a crucial role in making this opportunity possible. Sarah realized that her story was far from over. In fact, the most challenging and rewarding chapters might still be ahead of her. The journey from that first curious shot in an empty cleaning bay to potential Olympic competition seemed impossible, but it was happening one step at a time. As she prepared for bed, Sarah reflected on the lesson that her experience had taught her. Hidden talents exist in the most unlikely places and people, waiting for the right moment to be discovered. Sometimes those moments come through accident, curiosity, or simple willingness to try something new. The key is being ready to recognize opportunity when it presents itself and having the courage to pursue it wherever it might lead. The small silver pistol that had started everything was still sitting in that lost and found box at Thunder Ridge shooting range, waiting for an owner who might never return. But its real purpose had already been fulfilled the moment Sarah's curiosity overcame her caution, and she decided to see what it would feel like to hit the center of a target. That single moment of decision had changed everything, proving that extraordinary journeys often begin with the simplest of choices.